I wanted to surprise my husband at his workplace. The idea arrived like a small, bright thing that fluttered in my chest all morning. I woke before the alarm, the city still folded in darkness, and lay there listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing beside me. It had been a long time since we had shared mornings like that, both of us half awake, the room carrying that hush before responsibility returns. He had been busy for months. Meetings that ran late, trips he never used to take. I believed him because I wanted to. I told myself that love is what you do in the quiet. You believe. That morning I decided to bring the quiet to him. I baked the small chocolate cake he liked, packed it carefully, slipped the note inside the box. Nothing extravagant, just happy 6 years. I still choose you. Then I dressed in the blue dress he said made me look like the sky after rain and caught the early train across the river. The carriage smelled of coffee and damp coats. I watched commuters scrolling through phones, lives rushing beside mine. I rehearsed his smile in my head, imagined his surprise when he saw me standing there in the lobby. The fantasy steadied me. I didn't know I was clinging to it. When I stepped out onto the street, the air was cold enough to sting. His building rose like a wall of mirrors. I crossed the intersection with my pulse quickening, repeating the small facts of our life to myself, his laugh, our balcony plants, the way he still sometimes reached for my hand in sleep. I needed those details. They were proof. Inside, the lobby shone too brightly. Polished floors, walls smelling faintly of antiseptic and roasted beans. I told the woman at the front desk that I was here to surprise my husband. She smiled politely and typed his name into her screen. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly, one of those micro moments that lasts forever when you're watching for it. "Oh," she said, and the word struck harder than it should have. His wife was already here this morning. I didn't answer. I heard the rest of the world recede until there was only that one sentence turning over like a coin in my head. His wife was already here. I left before she could explain or realize what she had said. The doors hissed closed behind me, and I stood on the pavement unable to move. People hurried past, umbrellas snapping open in the wind. The cake box grew heavier in my hands. I thought of calling him but couldn't remember how to form his number. Rain began softly. I walked without aim, the drizzle seeping through my coat, the city flattening into a blur of lights and water. I tried to replay the words, to bend them into something harmless. Maybe she meant a colleague jokingly called the office wife. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe. But the voice inside me that has always known the truth whispered that this was not a misunderstanding. It was the moment the curtain lifted. At home, the apartment felt staged, like a photograph of someone else's life. The framed smiles, the untouched coffee cup, the neat row of shoes, all props. I placed the soggy cake box on the counter and watched a line of water spread beneath it. My heart beat so loudly I thought the walls could hear. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the kitchen floor with the light off, listening for his key. When he finally came in near midnight, humming faintly to himself, I studied the shape of him in the darkness, the man I loved, the stranger wearing his face. I waited for words to arrive, but none did. I only felt the sharp, dry taste of certainty. The next morning, he left early again. I remained seated at the table long after the door closed, staring at the thin silver ring on my finger.
Days blurred.
It felt foreign,
I moved through them as though underwater.
That no longer fit.
I
opened our emails, scrolled through photographs, searching for the clue that had been visible all along. There it was, the unfamiliar name beneath comments on his posts, the small heart icons he had never placed beside mine. Every message that once read late meeting began to translate itself into other words, her. Anger came quietly, not like fire but like frost. It spread slowly, numbing first, then biting. I imagined the life he had built parallel to ours, another set of routines, another version of him laughing in some kitchen that wasn't mine. The betrayal was not just his, it was mine too, for helping him hide it from myself. I stopped answering his calls. When he texted, I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. There was nothing left to ask. Questions are for people who still expect answers. I started walking in the evenings, long loops through the neighborhood until the streetlights hummed on. Movement soothed me. Each step scraped a little more of him from my thoughts. Sometimes I would pass the bakery where we used to buy croissants and stand outside watching strangers inside, couples leaning toward each other, and I would feel the ache of recognition and relief at once. Weeks later, I returned to that building. I don't know what I expected to see her, perhaps the other wife, the woman who unknowingly shared my name in the receptionist's memory. The lobby was the same, the scent of polish and coffee unchanged. But I was not. I didn't ask for him this time. I just stood there long enough to watch the elevator doors close, to hear the faint mechanical sigh they made. Then I walked back out into the street. The sky was overcast, light filtering through thin clouds. I found a bench across from the building and sat, watching people hurry by. Life kept happening, indifferent to my private apocalypse. For the first time since that morning, I let myself cry. Not the silent, leaking tears I'd been shedding in sleep, but the real kind that shake the body loose from its own cage. When the sobs subsided, what remained was not peace, not yet, but an empty space where pain could breathe. In that space, I began to see myself again, faintly at first, like a reflection on dark glass. I remembered things I had stopped doing, painting, calling friends, laughing at my own clumsiness. I had folded my world around him until nothing remained that didn't depend on his orbit. Now the orbit was gone, and I could either collapse or learn to spin on my own. So I began small. I cleaned the kitchen. I threw away the cake box that had hardened into an artifact of hope. I opened the windows and let the cold air rush in. It smelled of rain and new beginnings. He kept trying to reach me. Each message grew shorter, guiltier. I read them without replying. I wanted to forgive him only to free myself from the weight of his memory, but forgiveness is not a door you can simply open. It is the slow fading of echo. Months passed. I found a new apartment across town, a place with creaking floors and too much sunlight. I filled it with plants. I worked, I ate, I slept. Healing is not dramatic, it is the quiet repetition of ordinary days until they stop hurting. Sometimes I dream of that morning, the way I held the gift bag and believed in love as if belief could make it true. In those dreams, I always wake at the lobby door, just before she speaks. For a heartbeat, I exist in the last moment of ignorance, and I cling to it because it is pure. Then the words arrive again. His wife was already here, and I feel the world shift beneath my feet. But when I open my eyes, sunlight lies I will
across
never
the
fully
floor
understand
of my
why
new
he
home,
built 2 lives.
and I realize I survived
Perhaps he was
the fall.
afraid of losing himself and thought multiplication could preserve him. Perhaps he simply could. The reasons matter less now than the outcome. I am still here, and he is elsewhere, living the consequence of his choices. On our next anniversary, I baked another cake. I shared it with a neighbor and laughed when the frosting collapsed. There was no message inside, no hidden hope, just sweetness for its own sake. Sometimes I walk past his building on my way to work. I don't look up at the windows anymore. The memory has softened. It no longer cuts. I carry it the way one carries a scar, proof that healing happened. If I could speak to the woman I was that morning, I would tell her that love can break without ending. That the fragments of a heart still know how to beat. That someday she will stand in sunlight again, unafraid to be alone. I wanted to surprise my husband at his workplace. At the entrance, I learned that he had a wife. That sentence once shattered me. Now it simply marks the day I stopped mistaking devotion for destiny. I walk forward carrying only what is mine, my name, my breath, the quiet certainty that I was always enough. And that is how the story ends, not with forgiveness, not with revenge, but with a woman who finally chooses herself.